Video games based on anime sometimes suffer from a curse of bad quality, or maybe some mechanics just aren't fun even when the game looks gorgeous. For every Budokai 3 or Ninja Storm, there is guaranteed to be a swamp bad or mediocre games. Fairy Tail manages to avoid falling into the bad category, but it's also a bit problematic. When it comes to the story, I dropped off from Fairy Tail a few arcs before the one this game picks up with. As such, when some things in the plot made me raise an eyebrow, I can confidently say this isn't a game for newbies to the series. Still, even with the limited knowledge friends shared with me, I did enjoy some of the interactions between characters. Unfortunately, the storytelling and presentation is rough. While I'm not a graphics snob, I review PS2 games after all, it's impossible to ignore when you see rocks and water not exactly looking great. I should note this is the Switch version. I actually looked up multiple videos of others playing on the PS4, and it honestly looks way better. However, the game also seems to admit certain characters and scenes. There were many times a main character was talking, or at least one who is decently well known in the series, and they never have a model for some of these scenes. Plus, some story cutscenes are condensed, actually skipping some more action. One such example is during the tournament. Gray faces off against a few others in a race, but the race itself is just summarized. Another problematic scene between characters is when Lucy is taken away, as it lacks voice acting for some characters for some baffling reason. And of course, the character model's missing too. Or there's the potential dungeon with a labyrinth, but it boils down to just fighting against two enemy groups, and Elfman never helps out the party despite substituting for Wendy. Yet despite those flaws, I was able to enjoy some story moments, like Ursa and Kagura fighting one another, the battles against the dragons, and a few other stuff. It's just some assets clearly missing are distracting no matter how good the action is. Levels are usually set in small areas lacking much to do beyond fighting. It kinda reminds me of the Tillier games, which rely on collecting materials to construct items. Fairy Tail kinda does the same here, although the focus is more on the combat too. Materials can be used to form lacrima, which serve as the equipment for the gang to boost stats and give extra effects, like inflicting status ailments. Or you can upgrade the guild itself to grant bonuses to your party members and other functions to make the journey much easier. It's one of the few genuine bright spots of the game, as is the combat system. Much like Persona 5, all of the buttons control the action, though a bit less stylish. The game heavily encourages you to use your magic, as your MP can be recovered after killing foes. Then your physical strikes have the strength of a wet noodle. Enemies are set up on a grid, meaning if you are lucky, some spells can hit multiple types of enemies at once. Some spells can even push enemies into position to further add on the hurt or inflict other status effects. Combine that with taking advantage of their elemental weaknesses, the combat has a lot of potential to be fun. You can even chain together attacks too, allowing you to wail on foes with multiple spells, even getting a chance to use extreme magic, and wow, I didn't know Makarov could be so buff. No wonder porn of him exists. Challenge at first was a rarity, nothing ever feeling too taxing unless I was underprepared, like not giving Wendy enough gear or something. I eventually had to up it to hard to have some kind of fun, and even that wasn't enough at first. The difficulty began to rise at the tail end of the first arc, as soon as the dragons came, and the game began to really show off how much it has to offer. Sure, some side quests are shorter or can be very repetitive, but in other places, the writing was solid and captures the characters well. It's just a pity that the presentation problems I mentioned earlier also happened in this arc, depriving you of some potential boss fights. I also wish I could take on multiple quests at once, at least in hunting down enemies to save some time. Fortunately, the game does eventually give you some more mechanics to work with, like being able to hunt multiple monsters at once, which made me happier that I took the time to actually build up the guild to gain these abilities. I also like getting characters to bond with one another. Similar to Fire Emblem titles, you can gain bonding points depending on which character you use. Once you move a character up a rank, you can gain some nice scenes with them and a bonus to your combat abilities. Sadly, not everyone is able to get these scenes, though the benefits are still worth it at least. I also appreciate how faithful character movesets were to the anime, making each character useful and versatile, and it encourages you to play with your favorites, barring the story nudging you, and some units tend to be better than others. The final verdict is decent/price drop. While the game has surprised me with how good it gets after a few hours, there's no excusing missing character models, rough storytelling, and having to wait that long for it to get good. Also the annoying load times on Switch. I can really only recommend it to fans, or maybe to people who are hypnotized by the boobs. I have Samurai Kagura fans here, you know who you are. I tried to judge it as best as I could considering they likely just didn't have the budget, but if you are selling it for full price, I can't really pull back many punches. At least the game was better than how I thought things were going to end up. Kinda sorta. Maybe some patches will be put out, but the most I have heard is a photo mode and some DLC of characters who should have been playable from the get-go. If you're going to get the game, I would recommend the PS4 over the Switch, unless visuals don't bother you too much. Honestly, the game actually ran better when I took it off the console as opposed to docking it. Given what this game covers, it might have been better to try and make something original rather than stick with certain arcs. I'm the smartest moron, and any chance for Raid Master to come back as an RPG? Please? Maybe DLC? It has boobs too.